In 1933, a dozen eggs cost 11 cents, a loaf of bread cost 8, and 25% of every working American had no job at all. Your great-grandmother fed a family of 6 on less than $1 a day. Not sometimes, every day. Through winter, through drought, through the specific kind of hunger that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in quietly, like a house guest who never leaves. Today, we're counting down the 25 cheapest dinners you can make alone, straight from 1950s cookbooks. And here is what she knew that you do not. Number 17 on this list was so controversial in its time that school cafeteria boards in 3 states actively refused to serve it. And the reason they gave will make your blood boil. And number 3 uses a technique that food scientists only rediscovered in 2019. They published it in a peer-reviewed journal and called it a breakthrough. Your great-grandmother called it Tuesday. If you knew what your great-grandmother knew, you would stop buying half your grocery store. Hit subscribe, because this video might permanently change how you think about what a meal is supposed to cost. Now, let's count them down. 25 to 1. Number 25. Fatback and cornbread. The cornbread came out of the skillet dark on the bottom, pale gold on top, with a crust that crackled when you tapped it. The fatback rendered into the pan first, salt-cured pork fat, white as candle wax, and its grease became the flavor of everything that followed. Fatback cost 3 cents a pound in 1935. Cornmeal cost 2 cents more. In Appalachia, in the Mississippi Delta, in the rural South, this was supper for millions of families 6 nights a week. Not because they lacked imagination, because it worked. The shame came later. When prosperity arrived, people stopped talking about it. You didn't serve cornbread and fatback to company. You learned to be embarrassed by what had kept you alive. Modern chefs now render pork fat deliberately, call it lard, charge $12 a jar at specialty markets, and sell it as artisanal. The food your grandparents ate in silence is now a luxury ingredient. They survived on brilliance they could not afford to name. Number 24. Fried chicken. You cut the chicken yourself. 8 pieces, sometimes 10 if you knew what you were doing with the back. You salted it overnight. The next afternoon, you dragged each piece through seasoned flour, salt, pepper, a little paprika if you had it, and laid it into a cast-iron skillet where the lard was hot enough to shimmer. The sound it made going in was immediate and violent and correct. A whole chicken cost 35 cents in 1948. Lard was nearly free. The flour cost pennies. The whole skillet fed a family of 5 for under 50 cents, less than a dime per person. The women who made fried chicken made it for company, and made it for church, and made it for the children on their birthdays. Lard, which was abandoned in favor of vegetable shortening beginning in the 1950s, at the aggressive recommendation of companies selling vegetable shortening, has a higher smoke point than most modern cooking oils, and produces a crust with a quality that food scientists now describe as optimal Maillard browning. The switch to shortening was not nutritional progress. It was a marketing victory. The original was better. It always was. Number 23. Bean and ham bone soup. You saved the ham bone from Sunday. Through the week, it lived in the icebox wrapped in brown paper. By Thursday, it went into the pot with white beans that had soaked overnight, an onion, and whatever celery leaf you'd kept from the bunch you bought Monday. Dried beans cost 5 cents a pound in 1940. A ham bone was free. It was the leftover from the meal you'd already paid for. You were making something from nothing. Or rather, you were making something from everything you'd saved. This was a Great Depression staple in every region. Rural Georgia, South Texas, small-town Ohio. The specific ingredients shifted, but the logic did not. Nothing is wasted. Nothing. Modern bone broth retails for $9 a carton. It contains less collagen, less depth, and zero history. The women who stood over ham bone soup for 4 hours created something the food industry has been trying to reproduce in a factory ever since. Number 22. Macaroni and cheese. Not the box. Never the box. Before the box, there was a baking dish. You cooked the macaroni and drained it and layered it in a buttered dish with slices of sharp cheddar, real cheddar, sharp enough to smell, and poured a custard of egg and milk over the top. Into the oven it went until the top bubbled and went brown at the edges, and the custard set firm, and the whole thing could be cut into squares that held their shape on the plate. It smelled like butter and sharp cheese, and something baked past the point of softness into something better. Elbow macaroni cost 9 cents a pound in 1950. A block of cheddar cost 15 cents. Eggs were cheap. The whole dish fed 6 people for under 40 cents and left the pan something worth scraping. Children scraped the pan. That was understood. Baked macaroni and cheese, made with real aged cheddar and egg, contains complete protein, calcium, and the fat-soluble vitamins that processed cheese products do not. It also contains the specific satisfaction of having made something real. The box never figured out how to package that. Number 21. Green bean casserole. This one has a precise birthday, 1955. Campbell's Soup Company. A test kitchen in Camden, New Jersey. A home economist named Dorcas Riley combined green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and French fried onions into a dish designed specifically to sell canned soup. It worked. The casserole bubbled out of the oven pale and beige and soft, topped with those fried onions that went from crisp to something between crisp and yielding after a few minutes in the heat. It tasted like salt and cream and the particular savory depth that MSG, present in the canned soup, creates in the back of the mouth. People loved it immediately. They made it for Thanksgiving, then every Thanksgiving. Then it became Thanksgiving. Green beans cost 5 cents a can in 1955. Cream of mushroom soup cost 12 cents. The whole dish cost under 25 cents to make and served 8. In post-war America, where convenience was being sold as progress and canned goods were being sold as modern, this was a dish that arrived at exactly the right moment with exactly the right price tag. Number 20. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Thin sliced dried beef. A white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. Poured hot over white toast. Soldiers called it something unprintable. Families called it dinner. Chipped beef sold for 12 cents a jar in the early 1950s. The white sauce cost almost nothing to make. A tablespoon of butter, a tablespoon of flour, a cup of milk. The toast used up bread that was heading towards stale. Every part of this meal was rescue. Military families ate it on bases from Georgia to Germany. It was simultaneously the food of the very poor and the food of the government mess hall. Class meant nothing in front of a plate of creamed chipped beef. The beef did not care. You can now order deconstructed creamed beef at gastropubs in Brooklyn and Portland for $18 a plate. They serve it with brioche and micro herbs. It tastes almost as good as the original. Number 19. Navy bean soup. You picked through the beans the night before, looking for pebbles. That was real. You had to look for pebbles in dried beans in 1944. You soaked them overnight, drained them, covered them in water with an onion and whatever pork scrap you had. Then you let them go all day. Navy beans were a nickel a pound. They fed congressional cafeterias and sharecroppers' tables simultaneously. The U.S. Senate has served navy bean soup every single day since 1903, a fact they're proud of, though they've forgotten why it started. It started because beans were cheap and filling and required no explanation. The women who made this soup made it without ceremony. It was Tuesday. You made bean soup on Tuesday. That was the whole story. Navy beans are now known to be among the highest fiber foods available. Studies link regular legume consumption to reduced rates of heart disease and diabetes. The Senate got something right accidentally. The poor got it right on purpose.
Number 18. Vegetable beef soup from one bone. One soup bone, sometimes with a little meat still clinging to it, sometimes not. You browned it if you had the time. You covered it with water. You let it go 3 hours. What came out was brown and deep and smelled like Sunday, even on a Wednesday. Into that broth went whatever vegetables you had. A parsnip, 2 carrots, the potato that had started to soften, the celery that was going limp. A soup bone cost 3 cents at the butcher in 1951. You knew your butcher. He knew what you needed before you said it. The soup fed 4 people comfortably. It fed 6 people if you added more water and didn't tell them. This is now called bone broth. It is now considered a health food. Boutique brands sell it for $12 a quart with labels that say ancestral and traditional. They are not wrong about those words. They are just wrong about who the ancestors were. In 1943, the U.S. government issued dietary guidelines shaped partly by food manufacturers sitting on advisory committees. They quietly pushed families away from beans, organ meats, and animal fats toward shelf-stable, mass-produced products. The families who kept making cornbread and bean soup weren't behind the times. They were being told their food was inadequate, that they were inadequate. The suppression was not an accident. It was a business model. Back to the countdown. Number 17. Liver and onions. Here it is, number 17. The liver hit the hot pan and the smell rose immediately. Iron and earth and something almost metallic, dark and complicated. The onions had been cooking slow in butter for 20 minutes before the liver arrived. They were sweet and golden. The liver seared fast, 2 minutes per side, no more, and came out tender and copper brown at the edges. Liver cost 8 cents a pound in 1948. It was the cheapest cut at the butcher. Families who could not afford steak ate liver 3 times a week. And school cafeteria boards in Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan voted in the early 1950s to remove it from lunch menus. The stated reason: children didn't like the smell. The real reason: the cattle industry was pushing cafeterias toward processed beef products with longer shelf lives and higher profit margins. Children gagged on it. Adults made them eat it anyway. Not cruelty, necessity. Liver has more vitamin B12 than any other food on earth, more iron than spinach, more zinc than almost anything. The women who served it were not tormenting their children. They were medicating them. Number 16. Stuffed peppers with rice and ground beef. Green bell peppers, hollowed out, filled with a mixture of ground beef, rice, and canned tomato. Baked until the pepper softened and the top of the filling went brown and slightly crisp. Ground beef was 17 cents a pound in 1952. A cup of rice cost almost nothing. A can of tomatoes cost a dime. The whole dish fed 4 people for under 40 cents. The pepper was the wrapper. The rice was the stretcher. The beef was the luxury, a little of it going a long way when mixed correctly. Working-class families across the Northeast and Midwest served stuffed peppers on Fridays often. It was a meal that looked like effort. It looked like you'd tried. That mattered. Pride inside poverty is still pride. Nutritionally, the combination of beef, rice, and pepper hits protein, complex carbohydrates, and vitamin C simultaneously. Food scientists now call this a complete macro profile. Your great-grandmother called it dinner. She was right first. Number 15. Macaroni and tomatoes. This is not macaroni and cheese. This is different. This is older. Cooked elbow macaroni, a can of stewed tomatoes poured over hot salt and pepper, sometimes a little bacon grease stirred in. That's all. It was red and soft and smelled like the inside of your grandmother's kitchen on a cold afternoon. It was comfort in the most literal sense, something warm when everything else was cold. Macaroni cost 9 cents a pound in 1949. A can of tomatoes cost a dime. The whole dish fed 4 people for 19 cents. In rural communities that were 2 generations out of the Depression, this was still a weekly staple well into the 1960s. People who grew up eating this remember it without ambivalence. They don't remember it as poor food. They remember it as the food that meant someone was home. The tomato's lycopene content, a compound linked to reduced cancer risk, is actually enhanced by heat and fat. The splash of bacon grease those women added accidentally amplified the nutritional value of the dish. Accidentally. Again. Number 14. Fried apple rings. Apple rings, sliced a 1/4 inch thick, fried in a cast iron skillet with bacon drippings and a little brown sugar. They caramelized fast. The edges crisped and darkened. The centers went soft and jammy and smelled like autumn in a single room. A pound of apples cost 4 cents in 1944. Bacon drippings were free, saved from every batch of bacon in a tin beside the stove. Brown sugar cost a few pennies more. This was a side dish. Sometimes it was the meal. It depended on the week. In Appalachian households, fried apples appeared alongside biscuits and were called supper without apology. They were served to children who didn't know they were eating poor. They thought they were eating something good. They were not wrong. High-end Southern restaurants now list fried apple rings as a heritage side dish and charge $8 for the portion that used to be Tuesday's salvation. The cast iron skillet is the same. The apple is the same. The only thing that changed is who feels entitled to serve it. Number 13. Bread pudding. Stale bread, and it had to be stale, that was the point, soaked in a custard of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, then baked until it puffed and turned golden brown on top and remained soft and yielding in the center. It smelled like dessert. In lean times, it was the dessert. In very lean times, it was dinner and dessert at once, and nobody talked about the difference. 2-day-old bread cost nothing. It was bread you already had. Eggs were 12 cents a dozen in 1950. Milk was cheap. The whole dish cost under 20 cents. It was served in New Orleans boarding houses, in Midwest farmhouses, in Philadelphia row homes. It was universal because stale bread is universal. Waste is universal. The refusal to accept waste is the lesson. Bread pudding is now a restaurant staple. It sells for $12 at casual dining establishments and $16 at fine ones. Whiskey sauce optional. The transformation from poorhouse dessert to menu centerpiece is the most straightforward story of culinary appropriation in American food history. Your great-grandmother didn't call it that. She called it not letting anything go to waste. Number 12. Potato and onion hash. Cold-cooked potatoes, left over from the night before, chopped and thrown into a hot skillet with diced onion and whatever fat you had. You pressed it flat. You let it sit. You waited for the crust. Then you flipped it, or you didn't flip it. You just served it in wedges, brown on the bottom and soft on top, with a fried egg if the week had been good. This was Monday. Monday was leftover day. Nothing from Sunday got thrown away. The roast became Monday's hash. The hash became Tuesday's soup. The soup fed Wednesday. Nothing moved forward unless it carried the weight of what came before it. Potatoes, as already established, are nutritionally among the most complete foods on earth. The act of cooking and then cooling them, which this dish requires, actually increases their resistant starch content. This is now known to benefit blood sugar regulation. Your great-grandmother cooked leftover potatoes because she had leftover potatoes. Science caught up later. Efficiency is not a virtue.
It is a survival strategy. They knew the difference. Number 11. Biscuits and gravy. The biscuits came from flour, lard, baking powder, salt, and buttermilk. They baked fast and came out tall and soft, split open while still steaming. The gravy was made in the same pan where you'd cooked the sausage. A little flour stirred into the drippings, milk poured in slow, salt and pepper until it was thick and pale and smelled like morning. Flour cost 3 cents a pound in 1945. Sausage drippings were saved. Milk was sometimes available. Sometimes the gravy was made without sausage, just drippings from bacon, or just flour and water and black pepper. That was called poor man's gravy. It still had a name because it was eaten that often. In rural, southern, and Appalachian households, biscuits and gravy were not weekend food. They were Monday food and Wednesday food, and the food you ate when everything else was used up. The gravy stretched the biscuit. The biscuit stretched the meal. The meal stretched the week. Brunch menus across the country now charge $14 for biscuits and gravy. They offer it on weekends only, as a treat, as something special. It was always special. That was never the question. Number 10. Dandelion green salad with hot bacon dressing. You went out in the yard and picked them. Dandelion greens in early spring, before they flowered and went bitter. Young leaves, tender, slightly sharp. You washed them and put them in a bowl. Then you made hot bacon dressing, bacon drippings, vinegar, a little sugar, salt. You poured it hot over the greens, and they wilted slightly, and the smell was sharp and sweet and smokily complex. Dandelion greens cost nothing. They grew in every yard, every empty lot, every roadside. You did not plant them. You found them. In the Depression and through the war, foraging wasn't a hobby. It was the difference between eating and not eating.
Salmon croquettes. Canned salmon transformed into golden, crispy patties that stretched one tin into a meal for 6 people, proving that Depression-era cooking wisdom still worked in prosperous times. Mothers would mix the flaked salmon with breadcrumbs, beaten eggs, and minced onion, then form them into small oval shapes that sizzled perfectly in a cast-iron skillet. These weren't fancy restaurant fare, but they were protein-rich, budget-friendly, and filling enough to satisfy hungry workers and growing children. Served alongside mashed potatoes and green beans, salmon croquettes represented the practical creativity that defined 1950s home cooking. The key was removing every tiny bone from the canned salmon, a tedious but necessary task that mothers performed while chatting with their children about their school day. Many families serve these on Friday nights as their traditional fish dinner, creating a weekly ritual that everyone looked forward to despite the humble ingredients. Before we move on to the next meal, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps a small channel like this grow. Tuna noodle casserole. The combination of egg noodles, canned tuna, cream of mushroom soup, and frozen peas created a one-dish wonder that busy mothers could assemble in minutes and bake while helping with homework. This wasn't gourmet cooking, but it was smart cooking, using pantry staples and simple ingredients to create something that tasted like home and love. The crispy breadcrumb topping added texture, while the creamy sauce held everything together in perfect harmony. Leftovers actually tasted better the next day, making it the kind of meal that kept giving long after the dinner dishes were done. Church potluck dinners always featured at least 3 different versions of this casserole, each family swearing their recipe was the best. The sound of the casserole bubbling in the oven became the soundtrack of busy weeknight evenings when mothers juggled cooking dinner with helping children with homework and preparing for the next day. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and secret seasonings, then shaped into a loaf and baked until golden, represented the heart of American family cooking in its most honest form. Every mother had her own variation. Some added diced onions, others used different combinations of ground meats, and the truly creative ones tucked hard-boiled eggs in the center for surprise. The real magic happened when the meatloaf was sliced and served alongside fluffy mashed potatoes and gravy made from the pan drippings. This was comfort food that didn't apologize for being simple, just focused on being satisfying and delicious. Cold meatloaf sandwiches the next day were often better than the original hot dinner, sliced thick and served between pieces of white bread with mayonnaise. Children would watch their mothers mix the ingredients by hand, learning cooking techniques that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Fried bologna sandwich. When regular bologna wasn't enough, workers fried it up for extra flavor. The heat transformed thin bologna slices into crispy, curved cups that held other ingredients perfectly. Smart cooks scored the edges to prevent excessive curling. The frying process caramelized the meat's surface while keeping the center tender. White bread got toasted in the same pan, soaking up those savory drippings. Yellow mustard and maybe an onion slice completed the masterpiece. The sandwich offered more flavor than its cold cousin, perfect for weekend breakfast or hearty lunch. Factory workers could fry bologna on any hot surface, making it practical for workplace cooking. Before we move on to the next meal, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps a small channel like this grow. Tuna salad sandwich. Tuna salad sandwiches provided affordable protein when meat prices climbed too high. A can of tuna, mayonnaise, and chopped celery created the foundation for countless variations. Some added pickle relish for tang, others preferred chopped eggs for richness. Sweet pickle chips gave textural contrast, while onion powder added depth without overwhelming chunks. The mixture improved with time, allowing flavors to meld in the refrigerator overnight. White bread or toast held the creamy filling perfectly. Office workers could make them ahead for easy brown bag lunches. Fishermen's wives stretched expensive protein with mayonnaise and creativity, feeding families affordably while delivering complete nutrition and satisfying taste. Pot roast with vegetables. Sunday dinner meant pot roast slowly braising in the oven, while families got ready for church, filling the house with the kind of aroma that made everyone eager to come home. The tough, inexpensive cuts of beef became fork tender after hours of slow cooking, while carrots, potatoes, and onions absorbed all those rich, meaty flavors. Smart cooks started this meal early in the day, knowing that low and slow was the secret to transforming humble ingredients into something spectacular. The leftover gravy made perfect sauce for the vegetables, and any remaining meat became the foundation for Monday's hash or sandwiches. The whole house would smell like Sunday dinner from morning until evening, creating an atmosphere of warmth and anticipation that brought families together. This was the kind of meal that taught patience and planning, showing how time and care could transform tough cuts of meat into something tender and delicious. Egg salad sandwich. Egg salad sandwiches turned the humblest protein into comfort food gold. Hard-boiled eggs chopped and mixed with mayonnaise created the creamy base that satisfied without breaking budgets. Smart cooks added mustard for tang, paprika for color, and salt for flavor balance. The texture mattered. Some liked chunky pieces. Others preferred smooth spreading consistency. Fresh chives or green onions added color and mild bite. The sandwich worked equally well on white bread or toast. Church ladies served them at funeral luncheons. Office workers packed them for reliable protein, making them required only boiling water and patience. But the payoff was rich, satisfying flavor that filled hungry stomachs. Shepherd's pie. Ground lamb or beef layered with vegetables and topped with creamy mashed potatoes created a complete meal in one dish that satisfied even the heartiest appetites. The meat was seasoned with herbs and cooked with onions and carrots until rich and flavorful. then spread in a baking dish and covered with a thick layer of buttery mashed potatoes. When baked, the potato topping turned golden brown and slightly crispy, while the meat mixture stayed moist and savory underneath. This was the kind of meal that proved simple ingredients, when treated with care and attention, could create something truly special and memorable. The British heritage of this dish connected American families to their roots, while the practical one-dish format suited busy modern lifestyles perfectly. Many mothers would make individual portions in ramekins, giving each family member their own personal shepherd's pie that felt special and carefully prepared.